I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, has been charged with his murder, but at first, everyone thought this was a case about an alcohol-related car accident. Now, in the second trial, it seems like prosecutors putting a little more emphasis on Karen Reed's drinking. Here's the story. In the icy darkness of a January night, Karen Reed's world spiraled beyond control. That evening, her choices would be thrust under a merciless spotlight. After a night of bar hopping and bitter arguments, Karen and John O'Keefe, a beloved Boston police officer, parted ways in chaos. Hours later, John was found lifeless, battered and frozen in the snow outside of a fellow officer's home. Authorities painted a grim picture, a night of reckless intoxication leading to tragedy. They allege Karen, fueled by rage and alcohol, struck John with her SUV and left him to die alone in the cold. Karen's defenders, however, cry conspiracy, claiming her drinking was used as a weapon to frame her for a murder committed by fellow law enforcement. Now, as the retrial looms, the image of a drunken night, shattered lives, and a desperate search for truth haunts every step of the unfolding courtroom drama. There are some real differences between the original trial and the retrial of Karen Reed. One of those differences has been the prosecutor playing clips of Karen Reed giving interviews to various members of the media. These are recorded interviews, and the prosecutor has strategically taken pieces of those interviews, those clips, and he's calling them clips, and played them for the jury in between witnesses. At one point, he played a series of clips, a bunch of clips, back to back to back, all focused on Karen Reed and Karen Reed talking about consuming alcohol that night. I want to play for you part of it. All of the clips, a little too long to play right here. So we're going to pick pieces of what this jury saw played at the end of the day after the last witness.
And is the level of intoxication pretty high here for everybody?
It's happy.
Yeah.
It's
Because you'd had a lot to drink, right?
I wouldn't say I have like a normal amount.
What's it?
Like a vodka tonic every 40 minutes.
Okay. And so are you feeling like buzzed? I know I'm not judging, I'm just trying to get a sense.
Buzzed. The final count of my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest vodka tonic. It was just a really weak pour, so I asked for a shot. So, for my taste, it just tasted like that's the normal strength of what a drink should be. I felt fine. I felt like I was buzzed. I mean, I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking. I mean, I had drank, so, and that led me to question, like, could I have hit him? Did I run over his foot or hit him in the knee? Did I incapacitate him? I mean, I always drive with my music blasting ever since I was 16. And I know when John got out of the car to go into Fairview, I know my car was blasting because when I got in it the next morning to go look for him, I had to immediately turn it down. And I don't know, it's stormy. I have had a few cocktails. I didn't black out, but I wasn't as lucid as I would have been if I had gone to bed at 9 and drank a tea.
How did you feel after that moment? When you got in the car, did you feel like you could drive, and did you feel how robust?
I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway at 12:15 on January 29th. I mean, it was quiet. The roads were very quiet. You can see it on the videos.
Now, a couple of things about the drinking. Everyone was drinking, okay? Everyone that was out, including the police officers who were drinking at the bar, getting behind the wheel of a car and driving in the snow, just like Karen Reed did. The difference is they're not on trial for allegedly striking someone with their car, with their SUV. So it becomes much more important for the defendant and her state of mind, her state of being based upon what she had to drink. And you watch those clips, it's clear she's very honest about it, that she was in fact drinking that night, which brings us to the first question in our investigation. Was Karen Read under the influence? If I'm in the jury, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. You talk about someone who's struck with a car, struck with an SUV. Was she under the influence? Joining us to help figure all this out, Massachusetts drug and alcohol testing expert, Dr. Robert Swetinsky, and Massachusetts criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr. is here as well. Great to have you both here. Doctor, I want to play this for you really quickly. This is Dr. Gary Feller, the chief of pathology at Signature Healthcare, talking about the results of this, because I need you to kind of explain what it really means. Let's take a listen.
The blood test was taken 5 minutes later, so 9:08.
And doctor, what was the result of the testing for alcohol in the defendant's blood when it was taken shortly after 9 a.m. on January 29th?
93 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay, Dr. Swetinsky, I'm not used to hearing it like that. I'm used to hearing a BAC, we used to call it in New Jersey. What does that number mean? What does it tell you?
Well, the number is similar to what you're describing. It's a .093, and we think of DUI as a .08. So the value 8+ hours later was above what we consider the per se definition of driving under the influence. And .093 essentially. Okay, that's great. And let's talk about the 8 hours. Okay, what does that tell you about what her blood alcohol may have been at the time that she was on the road driving? It was higher. Alcohol metabolism causes your blood alcohol level to decrease at a fairly steady level. I believe there's some testimony where they extrapolated as to what her alcohol might have been, or a range of what it might have been at the time of the incident, say at midnight hour. So there was a range, and it was a fairly wide range given, looking at high and low estimates. I believe the range was .135 to .292.
That's a huge range, and .292 is extremely high. Okay. Joseph Krowski Jr., from the legal aspect of it, if this jury believes that she's under the influence and behind the wheel, what does that mean? How does that impact the way the jury sees this case?
The second charge that Ms. Read is charged with, of course, is the OUI manslaughter charge. And one of the essential elements is that the Commonwealth must prove that she was impaired, driving under the influence. It's important to note it's not illegal in Massachusetts or any state that I know of to drive after you've been drinking, but it is illegal if you drive under the influence. And it's defined in Massachusetts. It's important to note that you don't have to be drunk or intoxicated. The showing that's required is that you've drank enough alcohol that it has reduced your mental clarity, your judgment, your alertness, your ability to operate the motor vehicle. I'll go back to what I've said on previous episodes. That's why these statements are so compelling. I'm sure that the Commonwealth is going to call a witness to do a retrograde extrapolation, just as your guest has just talked about. I guess the defense could say that you can't rule out that Miss Read had consumed alcohol after she got back to Meadows. The problem is what she's admitted to on those 4 clips that you just played essentially is the statutory definition of driving under the influence. She admitted that her ability to drive was sufficiently reduced that she wouldn't have driven on a highway. I also think we've talked about optics. I don't think criticizing the drinks that you're getting at a bar as weak pours, so much so that you then ordered shots to double them up, is necessarily a great look either. And the admission that she was buzzed on 2 separate video clips, I think in this regard, for this element anyway, is damaging.
Doctor, I want you to take a listen to more testimony about from the doctor who came to these results, talking about the methodology that he used, which doesn't seem to be the standard methodology that's used in DUI cases.
When there's alcohol, it combines with NAD that we add to it. It creates NADH. There's something that measures, and a photometer that measures the NADH production. It looks at light in this physics and looks at 340 nanometers. And it's pretty accurate. It will monitor, it will tell you, it will tell the system how much NADH is produced, and that amount is directly proportional to the alcohol in the patient's sample.
Okay, Dr. Swetinsky, should we trust the results and the way it was done here?
That's the standard way it's done in hospitals. He's describing the enzyme test that is typically done in a hospital setting. That, by contrast, criminal state laboratory, Massachusetts State Lab, for example, might use a different technique. But for hospital testing, which is quite often what you get, that is the standard methodology. He's describing it in some more detail, but it's trustworthy. It should be reliable. There's no information to indicate that it wasn't.
So let me ask you, Joseph, we have about 45 seconds left here. Go ahead.
Sure, that's a benefit to the Commonwealth, isn't it? Isn't one of the underlying theories from the defense that the Massachusetts State Police and anything it touches is corrupt and not to be trusted? I don't think they're going to spread the conspiracy theory to a hospital. And if you look at Dr. Fowler, he seems to be above reproach, very intelligent, testified, very forthright, and very knowledgeable. So as far as driving under the influence, I don't think it's a good issue for the defense when you take that expert testimony, the blood test, in combination with the video clips and admissions.
All right, Joseph Krause Jr., you're going to stay with us. Dr. Robert Swetinsky, we appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your expertise. Thank you so much. Coming up next, is Hos Long still a smoking gun?
Absolutely not. I did not make that search at that time.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed!
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
And stated repeatedly, I hit him, I hit him.
She may end up taking the stand. Her first trial ended with a hung jury. They haven't proven anything.
Will a jury finally agree on a verdict? We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Ms. McCabe, you made that search at 2:27 a.m. because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you?
Absolutely not. I did not make that search at that time.
This alleged search was really the birth of the Free Karen Reed movement, and it became the cornerstone of the defense. This alleged search at 2:27 in the morning by Jennifer McCabe, how long to die in the cold? Hos long to die in the cold. Because if she's searching at 2:27, how long to die in the cold, then she knows that someone's dying in the cold outside and wants to know how long it takes. It can't be Karen Reed. This is it. The first time I talked to Alan Jackson, Dave Yannetti was also on the show that night. This is August of 2023. I asked them about this, and this was the case. Take a look. Because to me, this is crucial, right?
It is crucial, but to have a battle, you have to have two sides. There are no two sides to this. This doesn't come from us. This comes from Apple. The time of the search comes from Apple core data. In other words, it's not something that can be manipulated. It's not something that needs to be interpreted. It's something that just exists in the world as we know it. The Apple Cocoa core data indicates, or the core time indicates exactly what time that Google search occurred. That time was at 2:27 and 40 seconds in the morning on January 29th. That's 3.5 hours before John O'Keefe's body was found. Why is Jennifer McCabe, one of the parties that was inside the house that night, the sister-in-law of Brian Albert, why was she Google searching? How long does it take for a human body to die in the cold?
I'm telling you, it was the cornerstone, the foundation, and really the beginning of the Free Karen Read movement once this evidence, or this alleged evidence, whichever way you want to look at it, became public. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Is Hos Long still a smoking gun, and a smoking gun for the defense? Here with us, Karen Read supporter. She is Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. Kim Whalen is joining us tonight, and Joseph Krowski Jr. still with us. All right, let's listen to the expert from the prosecution, Ian Whiffen, the guy with the English accent, talking about this alleged 2:27 a.m. search.
At 6:24:18, there's a second search submitted using the same method, so still using the Safari search bar, this time searching for Hos Long to die in the cold. This is evidenced in the mobile Safari.p list. Again, there is no record made in the history database that to me suggests that the page never successfully loaded.
Okay, so what Alan Jackson told me back in August of 2023 was there's only one side to this. Well, now there is another side to this. Kim, is this for the Free Karen Read movement, for the supporters of Karen Read, is this still the foundation? Is this still the smoking gun? Or is it more about Trooper Proctor and everything else that's been uncovered?
Well, thank you, Vinny. For me, it has always been medically that Officer John O'Keefe's injuries were the primary focus of my interest in Commonwealth v. Karen Read for 1.0. However, I believe that absolutely Hos Long to die in cold is still in play. It is a battle of the experts, but we do have to look and say, if a Celebrite report that is independent of the defense populated this search at 2:27, what are other, defendants in our country going to be able to have, any say in moving forward? Does this mean that Celebrite is not the premier in forensic data anymore if you can have mistakes if this didn't actually occur?
Joseph, let me ask you about that, because this is a dicey thing. How many people have been convicted through Cellbrite data, right? And here the defense is trying to use it, and then all of a sudden the prosecution is undermining the Cellbrite data. What do you say to that?
Well, Cellbrite would tell you that it's not a mistake with the software, it's a mistake with Richard Green in his interpretation of the software. The expert for the Commonwealth, Ian Whiffen, and how are you going to go up against a guy with an English accent? But beyond that, he actually works for Cellbrite. I would presume that he's testifying with the blessing of Cellbrite. After this happened, Cellbrite administered a change, not because there was a flaw in the software, but because Richard Green, in their opinion, had interpreted incorrectly. It's not the search that took place at 2:27 or 2:29. That's the time that the tab was open. Think about it from a common sense perspective. Hos Long to die in the cold at 2:29, Hos Long to die in the cold at 6:24. You're not going to make the same exact misspelling at 2:27 and at 6:24. Also at 2:27, Jennifer McCabe was sitting home, also searching on Safari, information related to a youth basketball league. Common sense dictates that you're not going to be searching something regarding youth recreational basketball, and how long will John O'Keefe last out on the front lawn? So the data supports it. I agree with Attorney Jackson. There's really not two sides to this anymore. There's only one side, and the one side is that it didn't take place. One final note on that. Ian Whiffen, you can't even say that this is a hypothesis, because if you watched his testimony, he actually tested it out, and he ran diagnostic testing with other searches. One other thing that came from his testimony is there was a lot made about whether or not Jennifer McCabe had erased that search. And he testified under oath with all of his experience that That search was not manually deleted. It was auto-deleted by the software when it was overwritten.
So Kim, let's say the Hos Long is neutralized. It's a battle of the experts, and I'm not sure one way or the other. You still believe, though, there's enough other evidence that demonstrates a reasonable doubt, that demonstrates something isn't the way prosecutors are alleging here?
100%, Vinny. Between medical evidence and the injuries sustained by Officer John O'Keefe on January 29th, 2022, malfeasance and or negligence that resulted in the termination and dishonorable discharge of Trooper Michael Proctor in connection directly to this case, there is more than enough for Karen to be acquitted on all charges.
So, Joseph, we only have about 20 seconds here. Which is a bigger problem for prosecutors, the Hos Long alleged search or Trooper Proctor at this point?
Probably Trooper Proctor. And as I had said, I think the defense will hone in on him. I'm curious to see whether or not they abandon the Hos Long to die completely, given the testimony of Ian Whiffen.
We shall see. Good news, our guests are staying with us. Up next, what do Karen Reid's phone calls prove? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The allegations are that his girlfriend Karen Reid ran him over. She's been charged with murder. So what exactly was her state of mind that night? Here's the story. In the dead of night, Karen Reid's anguished voice cracked through the silence, leaving a haunting trail of voicemails for John O'Keefe. Messages filled with desperation, anger, and confusion. "Where are you?" she pleaded, her words slurring with emotion and fear. But John would never answer. Hours later, he was found lifeless, battered and frozen outside of Brian Albert's home. Those voicemails would become chilling evidence, replayed again and again, each syllable weighed in the courtroom and all over social media. Prosecutors claim the voicemails revealed guilt, painting Karen as a woman spiraling out of control after a night of heavy drinking and bitter confrontation. Her defenders, however, heard something different, the raw panic of a woman realizing something was terribly wrong. Now, as the battle for justice rages, Karen's ghostly messages echo over the tragic death of a man who once shared her heart and now defines her fate. This was one of the most memorable parts of the original trial. There were a lot of big moments, but this was hearing Karen Reid leaving voicemail messages for John O'Keefe. Now, from the prosecution perspective, this is all happening after she has run him over. This isn't before. They're saying this is after. She has murdered him, and now she's calling him on the phone and leaving these messages. Take a listen.
Now, as far as this first voicemail, what time did this occur?
12:37 a.m.
And with the court's permission, if I could play that for the jury.
Yes.
Third message, what time is that received?
12:59.
John, I'm telling you, kid, and nobody knows what the you want her.
With regard to the fifth message, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:11 a.m.
Yes, 1 in the morning, I'm with your niece and nephew. You her.
They're powerful. I would understand it a little more if the calls were made before the alleged murder, but these are just after the alleged murder. Which brings me to the next question in our investigation. What do Karen Reid's phone calls prove? What do they prove? Do they prove her state of mind? Do they prove her motive by what she's saying after the fact? Let's get to the bottom of this. Joining me, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober and Karen Reed supporter. She is Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. Kim Whalen is with us. All right, Dr. Bober, let me ask you, when you hear those voices, her voice, those messages that she's leaving, does it sound like someone who has just murdered the person they're calling and screaming at and screaming about?
No, it doesn't. It sounds like someone who thinks that their partner is still alive. But, you know, the timing obviously is very curious. Was she trying to cover her tracks? Was she acting? How many times before did she leave messages like this on his voicemail? This goes on every day in relationships in this country, right? What is it? Gottman talked about defensiveness, contempt, all these sorts of what we call the four horsemen. So clearly this relationship had a lot of problems. They were probably struggling for a very long time. And we know that alcohol, when you add it to the mix, is responsible for up to 90% of intimate partner violence events. So obviously she sounded very desperate in those phone messages. She sounded a little bit intoxicated. But obviously, if you go by the prosecution's timeline, the timing doesn't make sense.
Kim, what are you hearing in those voicemail messages?
I hear a pissed off girlfriend, Vinny, that just was at a house party that you were supposed to come and get her and go in if it was okay, and you didn't come back out. And then she goes home and you're not answering her. Now, she doesn't know who's in that party or what's going on, and maybe she thinks that you're doing a little philandering. And that's not a good place to be as a girlfriend, and you're feeling used and taken advantage of because she's back at home with John's niece at the time, and they had just had that argument in the morning regarding Dunkin' Donuts and spoiling the kids, and there was some tension that day. But to add fuel to the fire, you don't answer her calls after she's called you so many times. And it just sends Karen to a place where she leaves these voicemails, but clearly believes that John is alive.
You know, you mentioned the number of calls. Take a look at this on the screen. I mean, the number of calls is extremely high. We're talking about testimony that Karen Reed called John O'Keefe more than 50 times between midnight and 6 a.m. O'Keefe obviously never picked up, and Karen Reed left him 8 voicemails. What do you think, Dr. Bober, about the number of calls that are taking place? Again, this is between midnight and 6 a.m. 50 calls, 8 voicemail messages.
I agree with your other guest. I mean, I think if you take it at face value, she is someone who is full of rage towards this guy, who feels abandoned, who feels marginalized by him, and believes that he's still alive. That's one explanation, certainly. Another explanation could be an Academy Award-winning performance where she knows that he's dead and she's doing this to try to provide some belief in her mind that he's still alive, even knowing that she was responsible for his death. Both explanations are possible, are plausible. As you say, you know, when you take the same set of facts, you can tell a very different story.
Okay, I've got a couple more voicemails to take a listen to. These are numbers 6 and 7. Let's listen.
In the 6th message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:18 a.m.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit Amy. I need to go home. You are you, Vinnie, right now. Another girl, Kim's sleeping next to me. You're a loser.
The 7th message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
5:23 a.m.
Kim, as I listen to those, I mean, there is a lot of anger, but the anger is directly correlated to him not being there. I mean, to me, that seems to be the driving force here. The anger isn't about the Dunkin' Donut argument in the morning. The argument and the anger is coming from the wee hours of the morning. He's at a party. How much of a history did this couple have in terms of a night like this? Have we heard anything about another night like this where John didn't come home and she was back at his place with his children?
Yeah, Vinny, we do know about the Aruba incident, right? So that was approximately a month before, and John and Karen are down in Aruba, and the incident with the Sullivan sister, Marietta Sullivan, it alleged that there was a whole day of drinking that occurred, and Karen was back at the room with the kids, and when she had come out, then she goes and sees at the elevator, what do you find? Is your boyfriend being kissed or allegedly kissed by a family friend, and it felt probably like a gut punch at that time. And I always hearken this back to remind everyone that this was a pandemic relationship. And, you know, they really picked up and were very fast in Karen coming in and being a huge part of John's children's lives. And she was a wonderful addition, and yet didn't know really how to navigate being a, you know, step parent role and or the instant family that really came with that relationship.
Yeah, I always forget that too, that all of this began during the COVID lockdowns. Dr. Bober, so I want to go back to something that we were talking about just moments ago. When you hear her voice and you hear the rage and the anger, if someone has been drinking a lot that night, right, would they even be able to put the thoughts together that I need to cover my tracks, that I need to, if I just committed murder, I am under the influence, would someone have the capability to put those pieces together and start to form a defense already?
Well, that's a great question. And I think touching upon what Kim said, are we dealing with someone who had a history of alcoholic blackouts? Was there a history of violence? Was there a history of mental illness? What was the history of this relationship? Were there episodes of violence within the relationship? What do we know about her past behavior? Because we know that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. But to answer your question, if she did have, in fact, an alcoholic blackout, she would have no memory of the event and probably no recall of the event. So it's possible that alcohol was a factor here, and not only the crime itself, but the recall of the crime.
At the end of the day, Kim, do you think she has to explain it? Do you think there might be a change here in the second trial where Karen Reed, because we've seen these other clips of her during the course of the trial, the jury likely will hear these voicemails as well. Do you think it requires an explanation?
No, Vinny, I don't. I think that a lot of people, and you're trusting your jury that was impaneled by both the defense and the prosecution, and how you can look and interpret those messages are very clear. Either she is a calculated murderess, or she was a girlfriend who was very hurt, very angry, and 100% believed that Officer John O'Keefe was alive when she left them and just wanted him to answer the phone.
All right, Kim is going to stay with us. Big thank you to Dr. Daniel Bober. We really appreciate your valuable time. Thanks again. We'll see you really soon. Still to come, where did John O'Keefe go in those 36 steps?
How do you explain it? Two teenagers, they go from zero to the worst crime anyone can imagine.
She wanted to get her mom out of her life, to kill her.
You turned to murder.
Yes.
You are a shrewd operator.
I'm done with this interview. You're trying to make me seem like I'm a monster, and I'm not. Let me out.
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
John never came into my house that night. He would have been welcomed, and the defendant would have been welcomed with open arms had they come in, and I wish they had. I really do.
That's Brian Albert, the owner of 34 Fairview. That is the house that has the yard where John O'Keefe was found. And he was clear in his testimony saying that John O'Keefe never came inside. The defense believes he did go inside. I want to play for you some testimony from the expert who examined John O'Keefe's cell phone and looked at all the different apps trying to figure out the location of the phone, how long it was in different places, and the movements of John O'Keefe. This part, very interesting. Take a listen.
At 31 minutes and 56 seconds until 32 minutes and 16 seconds, there were 36 steps recorded. And then there was no further health activity recorded on the device for several hours until 4 minutes after 6 a.m. When 432 steps were recorded between the time of 6:04 and 6:11.
Count. Okay, 36 steps. 36 steps, and not in an expansive period of time. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. Where did John O'Keefe go in those 36 steps? Another crucial issue in this case. Where is he going? 36 steps that he took. Obviously, he's outside of the car. He's no longer in Karen Reed's SUV. Here with us, defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr., and still here, Kim Whalen. Okay, let me play a little more for everyone. I want to do this for everyone at home, then we'll have the discussion here. Here's more from Ian Whiffen talking about what he believes or how he believes these 36 steps could have been taken.
Could it have been a straight line?
It could have been a straight line.
Could it have been somebody pacing?
It could have been.
Could it have been somebody moving and jumping?
Yes. Jumping, if they were jumping forward, essentially.
Okay, let me put a map up on the screen right now, just to give everyone a little bit of context and perspective here about where John O'Keefe allegedly was, where the house is. Now, there we go. We made it. Okay, so the dot near the curb is close to the flagpole. It's about, based on the map, about 65 feet or so from there to the front door of 34 Fairview, right? And we're talking about 36 steps, which is roughly 90 feet, okay? So 36 steps, 90 feet, you're about 65 feet from the front door there. Kim Whalen, where did John O'Keefe go with those 36 steps?
Well, Vinnie, I think that exactly where your dotted map just told us. Officer John O'Keefe, it makes most sense that he walked toward the house, as was testified by Ian Whiffen as well, when he was in cross-examination by Robert Alessi, who said that the direction was west towards the house, and that was not included suspiciously from Ian Whiffen's report. Now, would it make sense that Officer John O'Keefe just got out of Karen Reed's car and paced back and forth or walked in a circle until she decided to reverse her vehicle for 62 feet at 24.2 miles per hour and strike him? I don't think so, Vinnie.
All right, Joseph, what are your thoughts here? And the time period seems to be about 20 seconds. 36 steps in 20 seconds. What is he doing? Where is he going?
So It was surreal today, right? Cell phones are so ubiquitous. They really have become an extension of the body. The testimony of Ian Whiffett actually tells the story, sadly enough, of John O'Keefe's last 10 minutes of his life through the forensic data that they were able to obtain from that cell phone. We know that the Waze, John O'Keefe logged into Waze at 12:19. We know that they arrived at Fairview in Karen's car at 12:24. Karen doesn't get out of the car, nor does John, according to the Apple Health data. John gets out of the car at 12:31:56. The story of going in the house is now thoroughly and completely debunked. We're talking about 36 steps, but remember, we're not certain that they're linear, and it takes you probably going to eat up 8 to 10 steps, getting out of the car, turning around, closing the door. But the steps, according to the health data, only last for 20 seconds. And where does the GPS put him after 20 seconds? Where were the red dots in the bullseye? Right at the same location at the flagpole. So he had 20 seconds of time where he moved. After 20 seconds, he stopped moving. The phone never registered again after 12:32 and I think 16 seconds right at that flagpole. But what was introduced in this trial, and I've done a lot of trials, I didn't know cell phones had a battery where the temperature was monitored. It's almost like a timeline. The temperature of that phone after he's out of the car begins to drop, and it continues to drop, and it never goes up. So it's clear from all of the data that John O'Keefe never went in that house. Big point in trial one was that they believed the Apple Health data had John O'Keefe walking 3 flights of stairs. That took place at approximately 12:22. We know from the Waze data and other data that car was still, Karen was driving that car when the health data had him supposedly climbing up the 3 flights of stairs. So look, I don't want to get into personal attacks or insult anyone, but we're really getting into flat earth stuff now if we're still going to think that John O'Keefe, based on the data, was actually inside of that house. It would be impossible for that to take place within 20 seconds, and the temperature of that phone would have risen.
Kim, we have about 15 seconds. I'll give you the final word tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention about that cell phone battery. It doesn't actually make sense because if Officer John O'Keefe's battery life was dropping for approximately 5 degrees until 1:30 a.m. and then it just stopped dropping any degrees from 1:30 to 6 a.m. And the coldest degree registered on that phone was after it was picked up by Kerry Roberts at 6:14, and it wouldn't have just stopped and remained at 43 degrees for 4.5 hours in 18 to 22 degrees during a blizzard.
All right, Kim Whalen, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much. Joseph Krowski Jr. will do it again. Now, despite the law in Massachusetts, I never thought this was a murder case. In fact, it appears neither did the first jury. But here we are at the retrial, and prosecutors are still seeking a murder conviction. Will the evidence support it? Or would they be better off going all in on a reckless, drunken car accident? That's a question that can only be answered by the 12 people sitting in the box. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.